What if faith wasn't just a belief, but a force that demanded action? What if following Jesus meant more than attending church or knowing scripture, but transformed every decision, every conversation, and every relationship in our lives? Welcome to the book of James, a letter so bold, so unflinchingly practical, it has challenged Christians for centuries to live out their faith with integrity and conviction. James, the brother of Jesus, writes with a striking urgency. This is not a gentle invitation to follow Jesus. It's a call to action, a blueprint for a faith that is alive and visible. His message is so clear, so confrontational that it leaves no room for passivity. In James 1:22 he commands, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." Imagine that for a moment, a life where faith isn't just something you think about or talk about, but something you live. James envisions a community of believers who are defined not just by what they believe, but by what they do. He calls us to let our faith shape our choices, to become doers, not just hearers of the word. But who was James, and what gives him the authority to challenge us so directly? James was not only Jesus' brother, but also a leader in the early church, guiding and encouraging believers during times of persecution and hardship. He wasn't always a follower of Jesus. In fact, he doubted his brother during Jesus' lifetime. But after witnessing the resurrection, James became one of the most dedicated disciples, a pillar in the Jerusalem church. His life itself is a testimony to transformation, of a skeptic turned believer, a brother turned disciple, and a man who ultimately died for his faith. James's journey gives his words a weight and an authority that demands our attention. His letter is not theoretical. It's the wisdom of someone who knows both doubt and devotion. As we dive into this book, James challenges us to examine the core of our beliefs and ask ourselves the hard questions. Are we truly living out our faith, or are we merely talking about it? He confronts the human tendency to be double-minded, to say one thing but live another. In James 4:8 he warns, "Come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded." His words call us to a singular, unwavering commitment, a faith that doesn't waver between God and the world, but stands firm in trust and obedience. In the pages of James, we find guidance on dealing with trials, on controlling our speech, on avoiding favoritism, and on cultivating patience. Each topic is practical, rooted in everyday experiences, yet deeply spiritual. He doesn't hold back from the uncomfortable truths. He doesn't just tell us to have faith, he shows us what real faith looks like in action. As you watch this video on Deep Bible Stories, consider how James's words might challenge you personally. This isn't just a study of a New Testament letter, it's an invitation to deepen your faith, to step out of comfort zones, and to embrace a life of active obedience to God. Are you ready to let James's message shake you up? To let his words push you into a more authentic, lived-out faith? When we face suffering, disappointment, or pain, how do we respond? In the opening lines of James, he offers us a perspective so unexpected that it almost feels impossible. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. James 1:2. Pure joy in suffering. For most of us, joy is the last thing we feel when we encounter hardship. But James insists that our faith is like gold, and it's in the fiery trials of life that this faith is refined, purified, and proven to be genuine. Imagine being one of the early Christians reading this letter. Many of them were facing persecution, social exclusion, and even the threat of death because of their faith. James's words were not written from a place of comfort. He understood suffering. He saw it all around him. And instead of giving a quick remedy or an escape route, he points believers to a radical response, to see trials not as setbacks, but as opportunities for growth, James explains that trials produce perseverance, and perseverance leads to maturity. He writes, "Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." James 1:4. This isn't about merely enduring hardships. It's about embracing them as moments when God is working deeply within us, refining our character and building a resilient faith. Each difficulty, each struggle is an invitation to go deeper with God, to trust Him in the dark, and to come out stronger on the other side. But let's be real. Finding joy in trials is hard. How often do we feel overwhelmed by our struggles, questioning God's goodness or even His presence? James knows that trials can shake us, which is why he reminds us that in those moments of confusion and pain, we have a direct line to the wisdom of God. He urges us in verse 5, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." Imagine that. A God who doesn't scold us for needing help, but who stands ready to pour out wisdom, comfort, and guidance generously. This wisdom James speaks of isn't just knowledge, it's God's insight into our lives, His guidance on how to navigate our challenges, His peace that surpasses understanding. It's the wisdom to see beyond our immediate pain and glimpse the work God is doing within us. James wants us to understand that while trials may be painful, they are not meaningless. God uses them to shape us, to build us, and to make us whole. Yet James warns that there's a condition to receiving this wisdom. We must ask in faith, not doubting. In verses 6 to 7, he says, "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." Doubt here is more than a fleeting uncertainty. It's a divided heart, a wavering trust. James calls us to a firm, unshakable faith, a faith that trusts God's goodness even when life is falling apart, that believes God is working even when we don't understand how. Consider this. The trials you're facing right now may be the very things God is using to build you, to deepen your faith, to make you whole. Have you ever thought of your struggles as invitations from God to grow closer to Him? James is asking us to see life's challenges not as interruptions, but as part of God's design for us, part of His way of making us complete. What would happen if we embraced this perspective? Imagine the resilience, the peace, the strength that would emerge if, instead of resisting or resenting our hardships, we saw them as tools in God's hand, refining us for His purpose. James isn't promising an easy life, but he's offering a faith that is strong enough to face anything, a faith that, like gold, becomes purer the more it's tested. James's opening words in his letter call us to rise above our circumstances, to find joy in what others might see as misery, and to seek God's wisdom with unwavering trust. This is the kind of faith that endures, the kind that transforms, the kind that can stand up to life's fiercest storms. As we continue through the book of James, remember this call to joy, to perseverance, and to unwavering faith in the midst of trials. Because, as James reminds us, God isn't just interested in helping us survive our struggles. He wants us to thrive in them, to emerge stronger, purer, and more deeply rooted in Him than ever before. James is clear. True faith is more than words. In a world filled with lip service and empty promises, he challenges believers to live out their faith with radical authenticity. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? James 2:14. This question pierces right to the heart of the issue. James isn't talking about adding a few good works to our schedule or going through religious motions. He's calling for a faith that is alive, vibrant, and evident in every aspect of our lives. Imagine a seed planted in fertile soil. If that seed is healthy, if it's alive, it will eventually break through the earth, sprouting leaves and bearing fruit. But if nothing grows, if there's no visible change, we know something is wrong beneath the surface.
3 of clubs.
Faith, James argues, is exactly
4
like
of
that.
spades.
If it's real, if it's
Spades,
alive,
8
then it
of
will
clubs.
naturally result in action. If not, we're left with an empty shell, a claim
Ace
without
of
substance.
spades.
James
6
paints a
of
vivid
spades.
picture of what he means.
2
He
of
says,
spades.
suppose a brother or
3
sister is
of
without
spades.
clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and
King
well
of
fed,
spades.
but does nothing about their physical needs, what
8
good is
of
it?
spades.
James 2:15-16.
5 of spades.
It's a scene we
6
can all
of
imagine.
diamonds.
Words of kindness, well wishes, even prayers,
Queen
but
of
no action.
spades.
James's point is powerful
9
and
of
simple.
spades.
Faith that merely feels compassion
Jack
without
of
acting
spades.
on
9
it
of hearts.
isn't truly faith at all. It's a ghost, a hollow image
10
of what
of
faith should
spades.
be. This is
King
where
of
James becomes
hearts.
almost provocative. He
5
challenges
of
his readers by
diamonds.
saying,
6
show
of
me your
hearts.
faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my
7
deeds.
of
James
spades.
2:18.
10
He pushes
of
us to
clubs.
think about what we believe
Queen
and whether
of
our
diamonds.
actions truly reflect it.
5 of hearts.
Because in the end, actions speak louder than words.
3
James
of
doesn't
diamonds.
deny that salvation is through faith. He just
King of
insists
diamonds.
that true faith cannot remain hidden.
4
Like
of
a
hearts.
flame in the darkness,
4 of
it
diamonds.
must shine out through our actions. The life of Abraham
Queen
provides a
of
powerful
clubs.
example for James. He
8
writes,
of
was
hearts.
not our father
3 of
Abraham
hearts.
considered righteous for what he did when he
9
offered his
of
son
diamonds.
Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working
Jack
together,
of diamonds.
and his faith was made complete by what he
10
did.
of hearts.
James
2 of
2:21 to
hearts.
22. Abraham's faith wasn't theoretical or
10
passive.
of diamonds.
It was real, so real that he trusted God enough to act in a way
I
that
bid
defied all logic.
I bid
Abraham's
4.
faith drove him to obedience, and his obedience
bid
revealed the
6.
depth of his faith. James's point
Nil
here is
bid.
profound. Faith and actions aren't separate
5 of
things.
hearts.
They are two sides of the same coin.
10 of hearts.
Genuine faith transforms the
Ace
heart,
of hearts.
and that transformed heart moves the hands and feet.
King
It's a faith
of
that
hearts.
doesn't just believe in God, but believes God, taking him at his word,
Queen of
stepping out
hearts.
in obedience,
4
even when
of
it's
hearts.
difficult, even when it's uncomfortable.
Jack
Consider
of
Rahab,
hearts.
another example James uses.
2 of
She was a
hearts.
foreigner, a woman on the fringes of society, yet her faith led her to risk her
6
life by
of
hiding
hearts.
the Israelite spies.
Jack
James
of diamonds.
2:25. Her actions
2
weren't
of
just
spades.
brave. They were an outward
Spades
expression of a
broken.
belief
3 of hearts.
that the God of Israel was powerful and true. Rahab's faith was
3
alive,
of
and it
diamonds.
moved her to act boldly.
Ace of diamonds.
James's call is clear
9
and challenging.
of diamonds.
He's
7
telling us
of
that
diamonds.
faith isn't a private internal affair. It's a way
Ace
of
of
life
clubs.
that should be evident to everyone around us.
6 of spades.
How we
King
treat
of
others,
clubs.
how we respond to those in need, and how we
4
act
of
in
clubs.
difficult situations. All of these are reflections of our faith.
King
So,
of diamonds.
what about us? If someone were
5
to look
of
at our
diamonds.
lives, would they see a faith that is active?
4 of
A faith
diamonds.
that moves us to serve, to give,
6
to
of
love,
diamonds.
and to sacrifice? Or would they see empty words, good intentions, and
Ace
no
of
real action?
spades.
James is inviting us
Queen
to
of
examine
clubs.
ourselves, to ask if our faith is truly
3
alive,
of spades.
or if we've been content with a faith that is
5
merely
of
spoken
spades.
but not lived. True faith doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be
7 of
recognized or
spades. 9
praised.
of
It
clubs.
simply flows naturally into action, touching lives,
Jack of
healing wounds,
spades.
and making a tangible impact.
King of spades.
Imagine the transformation that could happen if we all took James's words seriously.
10 of
If every
spades.
believer lived out their faith with boldness,
Queen of
with
spades.
love,
8
and with a
of
commitment to
clubs.
reflect Christ in every interaction.
4 of
James
spades.
isn't calling us to perfection, but to authenticity. He's challenging us to
9
let our
of
faith
spades.
shine through our actions,
7 of
to be
clubs.
people whose lives speak louder than their
Queen
words.
of diamonds.
This is the faith he's talking about.
8 of
A
spades.
faith that is living, breathing, and unmistakably visible to a watching
10
world.
of diamonds.
The question James leaves us with
2
is
of
this.
diamonds.
Is our faith alive? And if
6
it is,
of
how will we
clubs.
let it shine in the way we
8
live,
of
love,
diamonds.
and serve? James isn't one to avoid difficult truths, and when it
Eight
comes
of
to the
hearts.
power of words,
Five
he
of
delivers a
clubs.
lesson as relevant today as it was 2,000
10
years
of
ago.
clubs.
Our words, he argues, are not just
7
sounds or
of
symbols.
hearts.
They are powerful tools that can build up or tear down, bless
9
or curse.
of hearts.
In James 3,
2
3,
of
5 to 6, he
clubs.
writes, "The tongue is a small part of
Jack
the body,
of
but it makes
clubs.
great boasts. Consider what
3
a
of
great
clubs.
forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body." The imagery James uses here is striking. Imagine a single spark in a dry forest, a momentary flicker, seemingly insignificant, but in seconds it grows, spreading, consuming everything in its path. This, James says, is the potential of our words. Just as fire can provide warmth and light, words can bring healing, encouragement, and hope. But that same fire, when uncontrolled, can destroy everything it touches, leaving scars and devastation in its wake. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. They take root, they spread, and they have the power to change lives, both for good and for harm. James doesn't sugarcoat the challenge of controlling our speech. In fact, he says, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. James 3:7-8. Here, James points out an irony. We can tame wild animals and bend the natural world to our will, yet our tongues remain stubbornly untamed. It's a humbling reality, one that reminds us of our need for God's help in every area of our lives, especially in controlling our words. But why does James place such emphasis on the tongue? Because our words reveal the state of our hearts. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be, James 3:10. Think about this contradiction. One moment, we're worshiping God, singing his praises, speaking of his love and truth. And then, moments later, we might speak harshly to a friend, criticize a stranger, or snap in anger. James is pointing out the hypocrisy that so often creeps into our lives, and he's challenging us to consider whether our words truly reflect our faith. James understands the weight of words, and he knows that they are a direct expression of what's in our hearts. Jesus himself taught this when he said, "For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." Luke 6:45. James is calling us to deeper integrity, to a faith that doesn't only show up in our actions, but in our language, in the way we speak to others and about others. If we claim to follow Christ, then our speech should reflect his love, his grace, and his truth. The challenge James presents here is one that demands constant attention. Think about how often words slip out in anger or frustration, words we later regret. Consider the times we've gossiped, spread rumors, or let negative thoughts flow freely from our lips. These moments may seem small, but James reminds us that they carry weight. Every word, every phrase, every sentence has the power to uplift or to wound. James doesn't leave us in despair, though. While he acknowledges the difficulty of taming the tongue, his teachings point us back to God's strength and wisdom. Taming the tongue isn't about perfect speech or never making a mistake. It's about seeking God's guidance in every conversation, asking for his grace to help us use our words to bring life rather than destruction. So, what does this look like in daily life? It might mean pausing before responding in anger, choosing silence instead of gossip, or offering encouragement where criticism would normally flow. It's the discipline of asking ourselves, will this word bless or wound? Will it build up or tear down? Imagine the difference it would make if we saw every conversation as an opportunity to reflect Christ's love. James's challenge is not just about avoiding harmful speech, but about being intentional with our words. He invites us to become people whose words bring healing, comfort, and encouragement to others. Imagine being known as someone whose words inspire others, someone who speaks with wisdom and kindness. This is the potential of a tongue surrendered to God, a tongue that doesn't serve its own purposes, but is an instrument of His love. Let's take a moment to reflect on our own speech. How often do our words reflect our faith? Do our conversations bring light or add to the darkness? James's words remind us that our speech is not just a small matter. It's a reflection of our hearts, a window into our souls, and a powerful testimony of our commitment to Christ. One of the most famous themes in the book of James is this question: what does it mean to have a genuine faith? James doesn't mince words here. To him, faith isn't just about believing in God intellectually. It's about living in a way that shows that belief in action. In James 2:14, he poses a challenging question. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? James pushes us beyond mere words, beyond good intentions, and even beyond private beliefs. He's calling for a faith that moves, a faith that does. He doesn't deny the importance of believing in God. He emphasizes that faith is the very foundation of our salvation. But what he's saying here is that faith isn't just an internal conviction. It's a force that must show up in our actions, a light that shines outward, affecting the lives of others. In James 2:17, he makes it plain. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Think about that. James isn't saying faith without works is weak or insufficient. He's saying it's dead. This is a bold claim, one that challenges us to reflect on what true faith looks like. According to James, it's not enough to profess a belief in Christ. Real faith, he says, is living in such a way that our actions confirm and testify to our beliefs. James uses an example that might be uncomfortable to hear. He says, suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? James 2:15-16. Here, he's confronting the kind of faith that offers empty words without tangible help. Imagine seeing someone in need, someone struggling, and responding with well wishes but no support. James tells us that this isn't what real faith looks like. This isn't about works-based salvation. James isn't arguing that our deeds earn us favor with God. Instead, he's challenging us to recognize that genuine faith naturally produces good works. It's like a tree that bears fruit. If the tree is healthy, if it's rooted in good soil, then fruit will appear naturally. In the same way, if our faith is real, then good works, compassion, generosity, kindness should flow from it naturally. James gives another example, drawing from the life of Abraham, the patriarch of Israel. He says, was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? James 2:21. Abraham's willingness to obey God, even when it required incredible sacrifice, demonstrated the depth of his faith. He didn't just say he trusted God, he lived it, even when it was difficult. James points out that Abraham's faith was made complete by his actions, underscoring his belief that true faith cannot exist in isolation from obedience and action. James also highlights Rahab, a woman of seemingly little status and a foreigner to Israel, who acted on her faith when she hid the spies of Israel, risking her own life in the process. James 2:25. Here, James shows us that faith in action isn't limited by status, background, or reputation. Anyone, regardless of who they are, can have a powerful, living faith when they trust God enough to act on His commands. James's examples urge us to examine our own faith. Are we like Abraham, willing to obey God even when it costs us something? Are we like Rahab, willing to take risks for what we believe? Or do we fall into the trap of having a faith that says the right things but does little else? James is urging us to look at our lives and ask, does my faith show up in my actions? Think about the implications of James's message today. We live in a world where words are everywhere. Social media posts, statements of belief, inspirational quotes. But how often do those words translate into real action, real change? James is calling us to be more than talk, to be more than words on a screen. He's challenging us to be people whose faith drives us to feed the hungry, comfort the hurting, and serve those in need. Imagine the impact of a community where each person's faith shines through their actions. A community where people don't just say they care, but show it. James's vision of faith isn't easy. It requires sacrifice, generosity, and humility. But this is the kind of faith that can change the world, one act of love at a time. James ends this section with a sobering reminder. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. James 2:26. A body without breath is lifeless, motionless, and empty. And James says, this is what our faith looks like if it doesn't lead us to action. It's not just quiet or weak, it's lifeless. The message here is clear. If we claim to follow Christ, if we profess a faith in Him, then our lives must reflect it in practical, tangible ways. James isn't asking for perfection. He's asking for a willingness to let our beliefs change how we live. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a dense, dry forest. Now imagine a single spark landing among those trees, igniting a blaze that consumes everything in its path. This is the image James uses to describe the power of our words, warning us that our tongues, like a small spark, have the potential to set entire lives on fire. In James 3:5-6, he says, "The tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body." Here, James isn't exaggerating. He's opening our eyes to the impact of our words, to the damage they can do if we're not careful. In a time where words travel faster than ever through social media, text messages, and endless communication channels, James's warning is more relevant than ever. One careless word, one moment of anger, one impulsive statement can spread like wildfire, leaving behind hurt, destruction, and division. James challenges us to recognize that our words are never neutral. They either build up or tear down. They either bring life or death. James goes further, describing the tongue as a restless evil, full of deadly poison. James 3:8. This is strong language, and it forces us to consider just how difficult it is to control our speech. We may think we're in control of our words, but James insists that the tongue is unpredictable, capable of incredible harm if left unchecked. He even compares it to a wild animal that cannot be fully tamed. And yet, the power of our words is something God calls us to control, to discipline, and to use for good. Consider this. We praise God with our mouths on Sunday, singing songs of worship and speaking words of prayer. But then, with the same mouth, we might speak harshly to a loved one, gossip about a friend, or criticize a stranger. James points out this contradiction, saying, "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be." James 3:9-10. For James, this isn't just a moral issue. It's a heart issue, revealing the inconsistency between what we profess and how we live. James challenges us to imagine the type of words that flow from a heart rooted in God's love. He describes it with an image of two different types of water. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? James 3:11. Just as a spring cannot produce both salt and fresh water, our words shouldn't be mixed between blessing and cursing. James is calling us to purify our speech, to reflect the heart of God consistently in what we say. So how do we do this? How do we tame the tongue in a way that reflects our faith? James points us back to wisdom. In James 3:13 he says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. Here, he's teaching us that taming the tongue is not merely a matter of discipline, it's a matter of wisdom rooted in humility. A wise person understands the weight of their words and uses them with care. Wisdom, according to James, isn't just intellectual, it's deeply practical, showing up in how we treat others, how we speak, and how we choose to use the power of our words. James also contrasts two types of wisdom: the wisdom of the world, which is filled with envy and selfish ambition, and the wisdom from above, which is pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. James 3:17. The wisdom from above, he says, creates peace instead of discord. It brings healing instead of harm. This is the kind of wisdom that transforms our speech, turning our words into instruments of grace rather than weapons of destruction. Think about how differently our relationships would look if we embraced this wisdom. Imagine a family where words were always spoken with kindness and patience, a workplace where people lifted each other up instead of tearing each other down, a community where words of encouragement flowed freely. This isn't an impossible dream. It's the life James is calling us to, a life where our words reflect God's love and truth. In today's culture, where negative words often seem to dominate, James's message is a wake-up call to use our tongues intentionally. Every word we speak has the potential to either build someone up or tear them down. It's a responsibility that can seem daunting, but James reminds us that true wisdom comes from God, and if we seek him, he will guide us in how to use our words wisely. The challenge James presents is not easy. Taming the tongue requires discipline, prayer, and a constant check on our hearts. But as followers of Christ, we are called to rise to this challenge. We are called to be different, to speak words that give life. As we delve further into James's teachings, he introduces us to one of his core themes, wisdom. But this isn't just any wisdom. James describes it as wisdom from above, wisdom that is pure, peace-loving, considerate, full of mercy, and ultimately life-changing. In James 3:17 he writes, "But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere." This description captures something profound, calling us to seek wisdom that stands in stark contrast to the selfish ambition and chaos often seen in our world. Consider the world's version of wisdom for a moment. So much of it is centered around self-interest, competition, and success by any means necessary. It's wisdom that often praises cleverness without considering compassion or ambition without acknowledging it. James calls this earthly, unspiritual, and demonic, warning that where envy and selfish ambition exist, there you find disorder and every evil practice. James 3:15-16. James's words are not meant to be harsh. They're meant to awaken us to the reality that worldly wisdom, while it may bring temporary gains, often leads to broken relationships, hurtful actions, and a heart that is far from God. James's audience would have understood this well. They were living in a society rife with social status, competing philosophies, and a heavy influence of Roman and Greek thought that emphasized worldly wisdom. The people James was writing to likely faced cultural pressures to conform, to value status over character, and to seek success by society's standards rather than God's. But James calls them, and us, away from this path. He calls us to seek a wisdom that is entirely different, one that is grounded in humility, peace, and a love for others. The description of godly wisdom that James offers is more than just a list of virtues. It's a blueprint for a transformed life. Imagine, he says, wisdom that is first pure, a wisdom that has no ulterior motives, no hidden agendas, and no selfish ambition. This purity is a heart posture that is fully dedicated to God and to loving others without self-interest. And from this purity flows the other qualities James describes: peace-loving, considerate, submissive, merciful, fruitful, impartial, and sincere. This kind of wisdom seeks to make peace rather than stir conflict, to show mercy rather than judgment, and to remain impartial rather than taking sides. It's wisdom that brings people together instead of tearing them apart. What James is really describing here is a wisdom rooted in the character of Christ. Every attribute he mentions points us back to Jesus, who embodied all these qualities perfectly. Jesus, who was both strong and humble, both truthful and compassionate, showed us what godly wisdom looks like in action. He reached out to the marginalized, he spoke truth boldly yet graciously, and he offered mercy even to those who wronged him. When James calls us to seek wisdom from above, he's calling us to imitate Christ, to let his example shape our actions, our words, and our relationships. James also tells us that this wisdom results in good fruit. In Galatians 5, Paul describes the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. True wisdom, according to James, naturally produces these kinds of qualities in our lives. It's a wisdom that shows up in how we treat others, how we respond in difficult situations, and how we choose to use our influence. This kind of wisdom doesn't just make us look wise, it transforms us into people who reflect God's love and truth. But here's the challenge: seeking this wisdom requires humility. James 4:6 reminds us, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. In a world that prizes pride, achievement, and self-assurance, humility can feel like weakness. But James assures us that true wisdom is found in humble submission to God. He encourages us to approach God in prayer, to ask for this wisdom, and to trust that God is generous in giving it. As he said earlier in James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Seeking wisdom from above begins with recognizing our own limitations and admitting our need for God's guidance. James's teaching here calls us to reevaluate how we define success, influence, and even intelligence. In a world that often celebrates quick wit, personal ambition, and cleverness, James reminds us that true wisdom has nothing to do with impressing others or gaining status. It's about living a life that honors God and serves others, a life marked by love, humility, and peace. It's wisdom that prioritizes relationships over recognition, character over comfort, and faithfulness over fame. In chapter 2 of James, we encounter one of the most challenging yet illuminating themes in his entire letter: the relationship between faith and works. This is where James hits us with his famous line, "Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." James 2:17. It's a statement that has sparked countless theological discussions, but at its core, James's message is simple, direct, and deeply convicting. Faith that doesn't show up in how we live isn't really faith at all. To grasp the full weight of this teaching, we need to understand that James isn't dismissing faith. Rather, he's calling us to a faith that is so alive and real that it naturally produces action. He begins by challenging us with a vivid, unforgettable image. Imagine seeing a person in desperate need, no food, no clothing, and responding with nothing more than, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed." James 2:16. James points out the absurdity of this empty blessing, a hollow gesture that offers nothing of substance. This, he says, is like faith without works, words without action, belief without commitment. James wants us to understand that genuine faith changes us, molds us, and drives us to care deeply for others. He's not saying that our works earn us salvation, but that real faith cannot help but overflow into loving action. To drive his point home, he makes a bold and shocking statement. You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. James 2:19. James isn't mincing words here. He's warning us that simply believing in God's existence, even acknowledging his power, isn't enough. After all, even the forces of darkness know who God is, but that knowledge doesn't transform them. What James calls us to is more than intellectual assent. He's calling us to a faith that radically transforms every part of our lives. For James, faith and works are inseparable. He gives us two powerful examples to illustrate this truth: Abraham and Rahab. Both figures were known for their faith, yet their stories are marked by significant actions that revealed their trust in God. Abraham, James reminds us, showed his faith by offering his son Isaac in obedience to God's command. This act wasn't just a test of loyalty, it was the outward proof of Abraham's deep, unwavering faith. Likewise, Rahab, the unlikely heroine of Jericho, hid the Israelite spies at great personal risk, choosing to act in faith toward a God she barely knew, but trusted completely. James concludes that their faith was made complete by their actions. James 2:22-25. What James is teaching here is that true faith always shows up in what we do. It's not enough to claim we believe if our lives don't reflect it. Faith isn't passive. It's active, dynamic, and transforming. When we truly believe in Christ, that belief moves us toward obedience, compassion, and a life of purpose. Imagine someone who says they believe in forgiveness but holds on to grudges, or someone who claims to trust God but refuses to share their blessings with those in need. James says this kind of faith is dead, a term that should stop us in our tracks and force us to look honestly at our lives. The call James gives us is to have a faith that is visibly alive, a faith that works. This is a challenge for every believer. It's easy to say we believe, but harder to live that belief in our relationships, our finances, and our daily decisions. James urges us to examine our lives, to ask ourselves, where is my faith evident in my actions? Where am I putting God's love into practice? For James, faith without works is like a seed that never sprouts, a fire that never ignites, a life that remains unchanged. He's not just interested in what we say we believe. He's challenging us to show our faith through love, service, and humility. This teaching isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity. James understands that faith and action are like two sides of the same coin. They work together, building on each other. The more we step out in faith, the stronger our trust in God grows. And as our faith deepens, our actions naturally begin to reflect Christ's love more and more. James's message is an invitation to a fuller, richer, more impactful life. A life where our faith and works harmonize to reveal the presence of God to the world. But let's not miss the urgency in James's words. He's calling us to wake up, to put aside empty words and embrace a faith that is alive, vibrant, and meaningful. Our world is filled with people in need, spiritually, emotionally, and physically, and James calls us to be the hands and feet of Christ. When we serve, forgive, and love, we demonstrate the heart of God to a world desperately searching for hope. In chapter 3, James delves into a force that is as small as a spark, yet powerful enough to burn down a forest: the tongue. His message here is piercing, unflinchingly honest, and deeply convicting. We all stumble in many ways, James writes, and he doesn't hold back from exposing just how much damage our words can do. James 3:2. According to James, the tongue, though tiny, has an outsized impact on our lives and the lives of others. In his view, mastering our speech is crucial to mastering ourselves, yet it's one of the hardest challenges we face. James begins with a vivid analogy. The tongue is like the bit in a horse's mouth or the rudder on a ship, small tools that direct something much larger. James 3:3-4. Just as a bit controls a powerful animal and a rudder steers a massive ship, so our words steer the direction of our lives. What we say, how we speak about ourselves, about others, and about God, shapes our paths and reveals the true condition of our hearts. And James doesn't stop there. He warns that the tongue is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. James 3:6. This is stark language, designed to shock us into realizing just how dangerous our words can be. A single, careless word, a harsh comment, or a cutting remark can cause irreparable damage. Have you ever regretted something you said the moment it left your mouth? Or witnessed the hurt in someone's eyes because of a careless joke or criticism? James isn't exaggerating when he says the tongue can set the whole course of one's life on fire. The power of words is seen everywhere, in relationships, in communities, in nations. Words can inspire love and hope, or they can sow seeds of anger, division, and pain. Think about it. Wars have been started over words, friendships have ended over unkind comments, and families have been torn apart by lies. James makes it clear that we cannot underestimate the influence of our speech. But here's where James challenges us even further. He points out the painful inconsistency of human speech. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. James 3:9. The very mouth that blesses God on Sunday can turn around and speak cruelly about someone on Monday. This inconsistency, James says, should not be so. If we truly love God, if we genuinely seek to live in His image, then our words must align with His love, kindness, and truth. The challenge James lays before us is to see our words as a reflection of our hearts. What comes out of our mouths, he says, reveals what's within us. If we're harboring anger, bitterness, jealousy, or pride, it will inevitably spill out in what we say. On the other hand, a heart rooted in Christ will speak with grace, humility, and encouragement. This is why taming the tongue isn't just about self-control. It's about transformation. To change our words, we must first allow God to change our hearts. James isn't saying that controlling our speech is easy. In fact, he acknowledges just how difficult it is. No human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. James 3:8. His message is clear. Without God's help, we cannot truly control our words. It's a struggle that demands daily surrender, a commitment to letting God shape not only what we say, but how we think and feel about others. Taming the tongue requires humility, a willingness to admit our faults, and a desire to let God's love transform us from the inside out. So what does taming the tongue look like in our everyday lives? It means pausing before we speak, choosing our words carefully, and using our speech to build up rather than tear down. It's being mindful of how we talk about others when they're not around, resisting gossip, and refraining from criticism that doesn't seek to help. It means choosing silence over speaking in anger, and grace over judgment. James's teaching on the tongue is a call to accountability, urging us to recognize the weight of our words. Imagine the impact if we each made a conscious choice to speak life, hope, and kindness into every conversation. What if we committed to using our words to heal instead of harm, to bless instead of curse? Our relationships would transform, our communities would become stronger, and our faith would shine through every word we speak. James's wisdom on the tongue reminds us that in a world filled with noise, gossip, and hurtful words, we are called to be different. Our words should reflect the love and truth of Christ, offering light in a world too often darkened by careless speech. It's a high calling, but one that is possible when we invite God to be Lord, not only over our actions, but over every word we say. So, let's take up James's challenge to tame our tongues, to let our speech reflect God's love, and to allow our words to be a source of grace and truth in every situation. As James continues, he brings us face to face with a question that affects every decision, every relationship, and every conflict. Where do we get our wisdom? In James 3:13 to 18, he contrasts two types of wisdom, one that comes from above, from God, and another that is earthly, unspiritual, and even demonic. His words confront us with a choice about the type of wisdom we are seeking and the impact it has on our lives and those around us. James begins by asking a question that cuts to the heart. Who is wise and understanding among you? James 3:13. Notice that he doesn't answer by pointing to degrees, titles, or intellectual knowledge. Instead, James defines true wisdom by how it's lived out. Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. For James, wisdom is evident not in what we know, but in how we live. Real wisdom brings humility, gentleness, and peace, qualities that reveal a life shaped by God. But James warns us that there is a counterfeit wisdom, one that might look appealing or even seem logical, but leads to chaos and destruction. He describes this earthly wisdom as marked by bitter envy and selfish ambition. James 3:14. This wisdom is driven by personal gain, by pride, and by a desire to elevate oneself at the expense of others. Think of how often we see this kind of wisdom in our world today. The wisdom that tells us to put ourselves first, to climb the ladder by stepping over others, to pursue our own interests, no matter the cost. It's the wisdom that says success is measured by power, wealth, and status. James makes it clear that this earthly wisdom is not just flawed, it's dangerous. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. James 3:16. This kind of wisdom doesn't lead to peace or growth. It leads to conflict, division, and brokenness. When we're driven by envy or selfish ambition, we lose sight of God's purpose and we become trapped in a cycle of comparison, resentment, and striving that leaves us empty. How many of us have seen relationships damaged or dreams derailed because of these very forces? But James doesn't leave us in despair. He points us to a different way, a wisdom that comes from above, from God himself. This wisdom from above is, as James says, first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. James 3:17. Each of these qualities reflects the character of God. True wisdom isn't about winning arguments or advancing our agendas. It's about living a life that honors God and blesses others. Think about each of these qualities James mentions: purity, peace-loving, gentleness, mercy, and sincerity. This is a wisdom that doesn't seek to dominate, but to serve. It's a wisdom that cares more about integrity than appearances, that values people over power, and that seeks peace over conflict. When we pursue this kind of wisdom, we begin to see the world through God's eyes. We become peacemakers, bringing healing and reconciliation to our relationships and communities. In fact, James ends this passage with a beautiful promise. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. James 3:18. Those who live by God's wisdom plant seeds that grow into something life-giving and transformative. But how do we cultivate this kind of wisdom? James has shown us throughout his letter that godly wisdom begins with a humble heart, a heart willing to admit its need for God. In James 1:5, he encourages us to ask God for wisdom, promising that he gives generously to all without finding fault. Seeking godly wisdom means approaching God in prayer, asking him to guide our steps, shape our thoughts, and help us discern his will. Pursuing godly wisdom also requires us to examine our motives. Are we acting out of jealousy or selfish ambition? Or are we seeking to honor God and serve others? Earthly wisdom will always tempt us to put ourselves first, but godly wisdom calls us to look outward, to seek the good of others, and to prioritize God's kingdom over our own desires. Finally, we must look to Christ as our ultimate example of godly wisdom. Jesus embodied every quality James described